Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let's have one more round of applause for our board members. They are both fantastic women who do a lot in our community. We're very honored to recognize them. We're also very honored to have with us today our speaker that I have the privilege to introduce you. So, here we go. Rosenbury is our speaker today. She became the Dean of Levin, Blvd, Professor of Law at the University of Florida, Levin College of Law on July 1st, 2015. Before joining the UF Law Community as the first female Dean of the Law School, she was a Professor of Law and former Vice Dean at Washington University School of Law in St. Louis. She's been a visiting professor at, places like Harvard Law School, Stanford Law School, University of Chicago Law School. She's got some good credentials here for you. Before she joined the Legal Academy, she worked in private practice in New York City and also clerked for the Honorable Carol Bagley-Amon, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of New York, and the Honorable Dennis Jacobs for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. She received her A.B. summa cum laude in Women's Studies from Harvard Radcliffe College and her J.D. cum laude from the Harvard Law School, where she served as primary editor of the Harvard Law Review. We are very privileged to have her here today to join and tell us a little bit more about her interests and areas of expertise. Dean Rosenbury.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be here today. About 10 months ago, I was similarly introduced by a third-year law student at the Levin College of Law at an event about this size. He said the standard things, but then he added, "We are so excited to have such a young and vivacious dean." And he said, "Please join me in welcoming Dean Rosenbury to the podium." At that moment, I faced the type of split-second decision that leaders, indeed all of us, face every day. Was I going to say anything to the group in front of me? I decided to take the high road and say nothing once I got up. I didn't want to embarrass the student. I didn't want to hijack the event, which, unlike today's event, had nothing to do with gender. And I didn't want to seem rigid or strident, or on the flip side, overly sensitive. In short, I didn't want to seem like a woman. Even though I didn't say anything that evening, I have certainly thought about that moment almost every day since. It was a rare, explicit acknowledgement of the types of gender dynamics that female leaders implicitly face whenever they enter any traditionally male environment. These dynamics are intensified when the environments, the male-dominated spaces, are otherwise undergoing change and disruption at the same time that a woman takes the helm. That's why today I'm going to be talking about gender and leadership in times of mistrust. The insecurity, uncertainty, and distrust that almost always accompanies any type of change can become focused on the new female leader. Regardless of the type of change. The change can be economic localization, it can be immigration, it can be heightened terrorism, it can be shifting job demographics, it can be increasing socioeconomic inequality, Or the change can be something as mundane as making internal management processes more efficient. Whenever you have change with a new female leader or potentially new female leader, the problem becomes something different than fear about the unknown. Fear that we can't rely and trust the past or the status quo. Instead, the problem is reframed so that we can no longer rely or trust the woman in charge. The best sentiment is that she's inexperienced and not up to the job, young and vivacious. More often, and also personally, it's that she's undermining great institutions, inappropriately imposing her will on others. Now, we have obviously seen this over the past 2 years or more as Hillary Clinton seeks to become our first female president. I, in fact, could give an entire talk on this topic, on gender leadership in times of mistrust, without uttering a single word. I could just show the countless video clips containing hostile gender-based criticisms of Hillary Clinton. They're out there on YouTube. If you haven't done a search, do it. It's depressing, but you need to know. Even if you don't do that search, we all know she's been criticized as being pathologically ambitious, cold, robotic, calculating, micromanaging, selfish, corrupt, dishonest, programmed, inauthentic, and yes, untrustworthy. In fact, we're told she is an habitual, serial liar. And she yells. No one else does, only Hillary. Now, before things get too depressing, I want to emphasize that there is good news. First, most obviously, Hillary Clinton will likely become our next president despite these criticisms, right? This morning's New York Times presidential forecast gave Hillary Clinton a 90% chance of winning. Other good news comes from a Harris poll that was conducted this past January, which indicated that Americans generally equally trust male and female leaders in various contexts. So the poll revealed that 73% of Americans are equally likely to trust either a man or a woman as president. 73%. 83% are equally likely to trust a male or a female leader of a corporation, CEO of a corporation. 84% are equally likely to trust either a man or a woman as the top executive of a nonprofit. And personally, to me, 85% of Americans said that they would equally trust either a man or a woman as the president or dean of a college or university. So that is good news. At the same time, the gender backlash continues. Psychologist Susan Fisk, who is a professor at Princeton University, has revealed that people universally use 3 dimensions to judge all leaders. First, you have trust. Second, you have relationship development, which is often referred to in shorthand as warmth. And third, you have competence. Her research also shows that female leaders generally must show even more warmth than men. So all leaders need to show those 3, but a female leader needs to show more warmth than the equivalent male. Indeed, if women do not overperform in this warmth category, they are not just seen as cold, but they are also seen as untrustworthy and incompetent, right? So in other words, female leaders lose on all three of the qualifications, on all three of the categories, if they don't go above and beyond in the warmth or relationship development category. At the same time, of course, and we've all experienced this, there's a double bond. If women are seen as overly warm, it undermines perceptions of our competence as leaders. We are seen as soft, unable to take action without input, and we're seen as overly reliant on others. Now, in contrast, male leaders are generally seen as plausible and effective, so long as they meet a minimal threshold on each category, right? And they have no double bind. So you clearly don't need to be a professor at Princeton to see how this has been playing out in this year's presidential election, okay? So, given these dynamics, which have been greatly studied and unfortunately have not changed, how might we move forward, both on a national stage and in our own organizations and in our own lives? Now, one tempting solution is to treat gender as a distraction that we should just ignore in order to move forward. I'm sure that we all thought if we just worked hard enough, people will see the value of our work regardless of our gender. And it's a comforting thought, right? It helps us feel in control, right? That we can do something to overcome this, and not at the mercy of gender stereotypes. And plus, it's exhausting to have to think about gender all the time, right? But willful blindness will not change the dynamics that are deeply ingrained both in our minds and in societal structures. Pushing aside gender may initially feel empowering, but it does nothing to change the ways that gender will continue to influence perceptions of leadership and competence, whether we want it to or not. So, studies consistently show that gender dynamics, whether at the workplace or in society at large, alter how other people perceive our contributions and our work to the organization. Now, these dynamics differ across women, depending on differences in age, in race, in sexual orientation, geography, nationality. It's very much an intersectional dynamic. But all of us have to be aware of the particular dynamics and how they affect the perceptions of our work and how they affect strategies that we can deploy to manage them. So, if anyone could rise above gender, I think it would probably be Hillary Clinton, right? And she clearly has not. She has continued to have to deal with all of this stuff through no fault of her own. So I would argue it's time to put wishful thinking aside. That is not a good strategy. The alternative is to recognize and discuss the subtle and pervasive effects of gender bias, much like we are here today. And that actually can be empowering because it enables us to strategize and take action. Now, I want to emphasize that such action must consist of something more than simply insisting that other people change. Okay? Once we are enlightened, it is easy to be impatient, to insist that others just get with the program. Come on, it's 2016. Of course, there's sometimes a place for that. but it cannot be our entire strategy. In fact, that approach can reinforce gender bias instead of fighting. So, I will spend the rest of my time discussing 3 strategies developed in the social science literature, and particularly the management and leadership literature. Strategies that are designed to help women advance in organizations and lead them, despite the ongoing effects of gender bias. And these 3 strategies are: first, to understand the importance and role of sponsors and to develop a plan for earning them yourself. The second is to increase our ability to think creatively about gender and its role in negotiation, self-promotion, and gaining influence. And then the third strategy is to understand the unwritten rules of organizations and to embrace them strategically. So let me start with sponsorship. There is a difference between mentoring and sponsoring. I know we have all been in mentoring relationships. We have been mentored, and I assume everyone in this room has also mentored others. Mentoring is very important. It provides much needed advice, encouragement, motivation. Sponsorship, though, is something different. Sponsorship is when someone who has skin in the game uses his or her political capital to advocate for you, protect you, fight for your advancement, leverage their own power, their own reputational capital to help you get to the next stage in your path, the next stage in your career. Maybe, unsurprisingly, men tend to have more sponsors than women have. In fact, men in general have at least one sponsor, whereas many women struggle to find a sponsor. And the organization Catalyst has done very interesting longitudinal studies where they look at men and women who have graduated from Harvard Business School and touch base with them 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road to determine who has a sponsor and who doesn't. And the statistics are pretty depressing. Men are almost 3 times more likely to have a sponsor than women in this group, which is a very accomplished group. So, why is this? Well, of course, in many organizations, men are the ones already in power. And it may be that younger men or more junior men are more likely to ask a senior man to be a sponsor than a junior woman would ask a senior man. But it's also about the process of getting sponsors besides just asking someone. You actually have to earn sponsors. And how do you do that? You do it through stretch assignments. You do it by pushing yourself in order to show your worth in coordination with a potential sponsor. You work for someone, you show them what you're worth. So these are work opportunities that broaden your scope, empower you, force you out of your comfort zone, increase your knowledge and skills, but even more importantly, increase your visibility. And women often don't ask for these stretch assignments because we think we're not ready. Right? There are also many studies that show when a job posting lists, say, 10 qualifications for a job. This is a generalization, but it's generally true. Men who have 3 to 5 of those 10 qualifications are like, sure, I'm going to apply, I can do that job. Whereas women tend to wait until they have 8, 9, or 10 of the qualifications, right? Similarly, it goes with stretch assignments. Women tend to hold back, saying, oh, I'm not ready for that. But one story that Michelle Duguid, who was a professor at the business school at Washington University, she's now at Cornell Business School, uses to illustrate this dynamic is she was once in a room like this talking to a more mixed audience of male and female managers and leaders about these dynamics. And to use an example of how men might feel more authoritative on certain topics and women might feel more authoritative on other topics, she asked how many people in the room were experts on breastfeeding. She was shocked that in her room, the majority of people who raised their hands were men. At the cocktail hour afterwards, she tried to get to the bottom of this. So she asked some of the men, I noticed you said you were an expert in breastfeeding. How did that happen? The answers were such like, well, my wife breastfed 3 kids, or I watched a documentary on breastfeeding, or, well, I was breastfed. The women, in contrast, would be like, well, you know, I tried to breastfeed, but you know, there's some problems latching, and I went to the lactation specialist, but I didn't really think that I got it right, and you know, and so in the end, I only breastfed for 6 months, and I don't think that makes me an expert. This is the dynamic I am talking about. And clearly, we've all encountered it with others and with ourselves. And it's about finding ways to fight the instinct that you're not ready, that you're not an expert, that your experiences don't count. And instead, plunge forward and ask for those stretch assignments. Now, of course, though, and this gets to the second point, we also have to be aware of the role of gender in self-promotion and negotiation. Right? If it was just as easy as saying, well, look, I'm ready for this. I have all these skills. Let me tell you my 10 best accomplishments, and that's all that it took, I think we'd be in a much different place right now. But as all of you know, women who engage in self-promotion in various organizations experience backlash. Through our socialization, we expect women to be a certain way and men to act another way. And so the research shows that women experience backlash when they violate expectations and act in more masculine ways. And self-promotion is often seen as masculine. Now, of course, you have to be careful of this double bind, because if you're too feminine, then you're perceived as incompetent, right? So you have to really be careful here. It's like walking the tightrope. How do you get beyond these dynamics? Well, in the self-promotion context, one strategy that has been developed and verified in the management literature is what I call the posse approach. You form a group of women, or women and men, to celebrate each other's accomplishments. So you promote the accomplishments of your posse. When one member of your posse does something great, you don't expect that person to promote his or her accomplishments. Instead, you do it for your friend. Likewise, when you have a success, your posse will celebrate it with you and make sure the people in power know about it. It's common sense, right? And some people don't like it because they're like, well, shouldn't women just fight the stereotype directly? And this is feeding into the stereotype instead of challenging it. But this is one way that we can be aware of the dynamics and work within them. And the posse approach is a very easy way to begin to do it. Similarly in negotiations, we all know, the common saying, women don't ask. And that's why they often start at lower salaries than men and can never catch up. And of course, there is literature detailing the fact that men are more likely to be assertive in an initial negotiation for their salary than women are. But there's also literature showing there's a good reason why women aren't aggressive in these negotiations. It's because they experience huge backlash when they ask for more money. So we're once again in a double bind. We're criticized for not asking, yet when we ask, we're punished. What do? Well, these are 3 strategies that I've used based on the literature. And I even used them as I negotiated for my role here at University of Florida, as I negotiated my salary with Provost Glover. One strategy is you say you're negotiating for the team, not for yourself. So you're negotiating for the organization. So in my context, it was the following. We want the University of Florida Levin College of Law to be seen as one of the nation's top law schools. If we're going to be a top law school, the dean needs to be paid a top salary. So I need to be paid more. Another strategy is to blame it on someone else. This is how it played out in my negotiation. In fact, I talked with the chair of the hiring committee and the interim dean, and they both agreed that that initial number was too low. And they told me I needed to ask for more money so we could be seen as a top law school. Okay? Simple. But it worked, at least in my case, and I think studies show it can work in many other situations. Final strategy, which was less personal to me, but in this context, but I've used in other contexts, is that you negotiate while expressing concern for social relationships. Okay, this goes back to the warmth. My team really needs this, or even I really need this. But I'm concerned that John may have an issue with it. How can we address his concerns and make sure we can move forward in a productive way? That's negotiation in the context of a concern for social relationships. Now, once again, we get dangerously close to feeding into gender stereotypes here instead of challenging them. But the literature shows that this can be an effective way for women to get more in negotiations. So, this gets me to the third point, the importance of understanding unwritten organization rules and norms. Right? I know up until now, some of the advice that I've been discussing can be seen as contradictory. I often see it as contradictory. We need to be assertive, but not too assertive. We need to transcend gender stereotypes while also embracing them. And this just shows that this is a very complex dynamic. I think the Hillary Clinton campaign has highlighted this better than any other example can. But the point of emphasizing the unwritten rules and norms is to be always aware of what's going on under the surface. And then being strategic about what you do with that knowledge. Now, women are often better at understanding these unwritten rules and norms, of understanding what's going on beneath the surface, because studies show we have a higher emotional intelligence on average than men do. At the same time, however, other studies show that women like to follow the written rules. We're more of a rule-following bunch than men. And we're often uncomfortable putting those written rules aside in order to focus on the unwritten rules. In other words, we resist being strategic. We think it's unseemly, that somehow we're not playing fair. It's distasteful. But if we can put those concerns aside, at least some of the time, we can see what's really going on in an organization. We might have to work harder to uncover the unwritten rules because sometimes they're passed down in men's rooms or on the golf course or in the fraternity house. But we can do it. We have this emotional intelligence. So here are 4 ways that I have developed for what I call unleashing your inner political being and embracing the unwritten rules of an organization. The first is to pay attention to the ways other people speak and adopt their style when appropriate. So if a boss or client emails you, you email them back. If he or she calls, you call them back. We mimic the culture of the organization. If your boss doesn't answer all of her emails, we don't have to answer all of the emails. If your boss answers every email within an hour, you have to try to find a way to answer every email within an hour, mimicking the culture. Second, figure out who the real decision makers are. Right? It's often not at all what's indicated on the org chart. Right? So figure out who are the real decision makers and determine in what language they speak. And by this I don't mean English, Spanish, etc. I mean, what motivates them? What gets them excited? For some people it's about sports, Gator football. Other people it might be about barbecue. For other people it might be about politics. You need to understand in what language they speak and craft language to reach them in turn. Third, strategically ask for feedback. Asking what you could do better, but more importantly, asking about what you have done well, which is often hard, but it feeds into many of the other points I've already discussed. And finally, develop a growth mindset by using a small wins approach, where you say, today I'm going to try this. Hopefully you'll succeed. But if you don't, you learn to fail fast and well. You pick yourself back up, you don't beat yourself up, and you try the next thing. You don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So, in closing, will each of these strategies, sponsorship, mediating the backlash, embracing the unwritten rules, will these 3 strategies make everyone in your organization trust you? Absolutely not. Right? But they are ways to begin to acknowledge and combat the gender dynamics that often undermine female leaders, or at the very least, make the lives of female leaders difficult. And it's only by acknowledging these dynamics, discussing them, and working creatively within them that we will be able to begin to move forward. A year from now, I very much hope that we will have 8 months of a Hillary Clinton presidency to dissect. Our case study in gender and leadership, right? Now, some of the dissection will continue to be depressing. I predict the YouTube videos will be even worse. The parody videos will be even worse once she's in the White House. But I'm also hopeful that much of the case study will be inspiring. Most of all, I'm hopeful that we will begin to develop new models of gender, leadership, and trust, so that 30, 40, 50 years from now, my remarks today will seem quaint and a mere relic of the past. Thank you very much.
It was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much.